Time to dig into some of the big questions that we are facing as we go headlong into the bulk of week 5 coming up on Sunday. And one of the bigger news stories of the week was the change in Houston. Head coach, general manager, play caller, and ruler of the hallway, I guess. Bill O'Brien has been let go there in Houston. And there are certainly questions about this offense and wondering what was going on with the play calling, why this offense wasn't scoring more points than it was. So now the Texans are free of Bill O'Brien. What do we expect from this offense this week, Florio?
Is it bad that I expect them to come out and just click on all cylinders? I think they're gonna just come out firing, and
you're not alone.
I don't know. I don't have a lot of evidence in that. The Jaguars are not a great defense. They are a good matchup for a lot of these Texans players, especially in the run game. But it just seems like one of those situations where the head coach is gone, and it didn't seem like he was super popular with the players. And now Deshaun Watson is just going to come out and set the world on fire.
I agree. I think what you see a lot of times in these situations when you have a head coaching change is whoever comes in next, and especially if there's a change at play caller or offensive coordinator, usually the person who comes in next decides to keep it sort of simple and basically just put the ball in the hands of their best player and let that player go out and make plays. And in this case, it's Deshaun Watson. And you sort of look at what's going on, right? I mean, last year, the Texans were scoring about 23.5 points a game. That's down to 20 points. They're down in total yards about, almost 35 yards per game. Rushing yards are down significantly, almost about 50 rushing yards per game this year versus last year. So I think right now it's just the Texans need to sort of push reset on everything. I think like we have seen in Seattle where the Seahawks have decided to let Russ cook. I think the Texans are going to go out and let Deshaun Watson do his thing and let him be great, which is nice because I've got Deshaun Watson in a couple of leagues, so I would love to see him just sort of get unleashed and do his thing. But I'm with you. I think there's no empirical way to sort of predict this thing. It's just kind of a feeling, and having watched football for a while and just seeing how these things work, this feels like the Texans are going to turn some things around. Maybe the other question, by the way, just quickly, maybe this means they're not going to force feed David Johnson as much. I felt like maybe they were trying to prove a point. And so do we start to de-emphasize David Johnson in our lineups if we haven't already?
I think a little bit. I'm actually... Duke Johnson is someone I have a little bit more interest in too. I wrote about him in the Sleeper article this week. I think that Bill O'Brien, he traded DeAndre Hopkins away for David Johnson. There was that, that he owed David Johnson. It felt like he needed to feed him so that David Johnson could put up good numbers to kind of warrant making that trade. But now O'Brien is gone, so they don't owe David Johnson that. And we already saw Duke Johnson last week play about 40% of the snaps. We saw him get used in the passing game. So with Bill O'Brien gone now and there not being that allegiance to David Johnson, I think that his weekly touches could go down and Duke Johnson's could go up. And that would, I think, be amazing for fantasy Twitter, because the one thing they always complain about is why Duke Johnson has not got an opportunity to be a 3-down back yet.
David Johnson getting about 15 touches a week. I wouldn't be surprised if you see that number get down closer to 10. And as much as I love Duke Johnson, I feel like everywhere he's gone, he's had the same problem. He's a good running back, but he's been on teams with better running backs. And he's a good receiver, but he's always been on teams with better receivers. And so that has sort of capped, I think, his fantasy production, unfortunately. But we'll see. Maybe things turn around for him there. Teddy Bridgewater has quietly, I think, had a very good season in Carolina. I know for fantasy, he hasn't really raised any eyebrows, but coming into the week, he was 6th in total passing yards in the NFL. The problem was he had just 4 touchdowns. He gets a great matchup with the Falcons this week. So what are you projecting for Teddy Two Gloves?
I have Teddy Two Gloves as a top 12 quarterback this week because the Falcons are just, like you said, Marcus, he's been playing pretty well, and the Falcons are just that get-right game for everyone so far this year, and the touchdowns have been the one issue for Teddy Bridgewater. Well, the Falcons have allowed more passing touchdowns than any team this year. They're allowing over 32 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, and they've allowed a quarterback to score 29 fantasy points in every single game this year except for one. It was against the Bears when they pulled Mitchell Trubisky, but if you combine Nick Foles and Trubisky's fantasy points that week, it's just under 29. So I think this is as good of a matchup as you can get for a quarterback. And Teddy, like if you're worried about Josh Allen or Ryan Tannehill or any of those guys, pick up Teddy off the waiver wire and start him.
Absolutely. He should be one of the top streaming options this week. You mentioned the quarterbacks that we're sort of waiting on and not sure about. Also, the fact that Aaron Rodgers is on a bye, Matthew Stafford is on a bye. So there is a need for quarterbacks this week. I think Teddy Bridgewater is maybe one of the best options you can have. And the Falcons have given up 13 passing touchdowns, most in the league so far. So if that's the one thing that Teddy has been lacking, this is an opportunity for him to get healthy in that category. On the other side of that game, Todd Gurley has sort of been kept afloat by his ability to score touchdowns. I think that's what's helped him over the last couple of years, fantasy-wise. But he gets a great matchup in Carolina. I know they shut down Kenyon Drake last week, but I'm putting that aside. What are your expectations for Todd Gurley?
I feel kind of gross saying this, but I have Todd Gurley as my RB12 this week. And Todd Gurley hasn't had 90 scrimmage yards in a game yet this season, but he does have 5 touchdowns. And the Panthers have already allowed they're tied with the Raiders for most touchdowns allowed to running backs this season. That's after allowing by far the most to the position in 2019. So I think there's a clear recipe for success of running backs against the Panthers, not including Kenyon Drake, but Todd Gurley, like you said, Marcus, the touchdowns are what saved his season. I expect him to score a touchdown this week, and I would not be surprised if he scored twice. But I will say that after this game against the Panthers, I think I would be looking to sell high, because if he has a good game, that's 2 strong games in a row, even though it's been weak matchups. But your opponent, whoever you're trading with, doesn't need to know that. So go out and try to trade Todd Gurley high, I think, if he has a good game this week.
Agree completely there. Yeah, every week we keep saying, yeah, I mean, Gurley had a good game, but if you take away the touchdowns, at some point we have to stop saying if you took away the touchdowns, because he keeps scoring touchdowns every week. But I guess at the same time, and I know I'm sort of double speaking here, I don't want to live on that razor's edge of having to count on those touchdowns each and every week, because the yardage totals aren't great. And the thing that I thought would happen, which was the Falcons would integrate him more into the passing game, that's not happening. And so what little hope I had that maybe he could sort of rebound a little bit, that seems to be going away. Just sort of weird in an offense that has to throw the football a lot, but that really is the case. So Todd Gurley, I think you play him this week. If you can move him after that, that is probably the best course of action. The Giants' offense has been not great. That's to put it mildly so far. I mean, they have 3 touchdowns, I think, in their first 4 games, which is sort of hard to do in the modern NFL. But here we are. They get the Cowboys this week, and the Cowboys defense has been about as bad as it can be. The fact that the Cowboys score a lot of points means that the other team has to score a lot to keep up with it. So what would you do with any Giants players that you have on your roster this week?
I think this is the week that you got to start him. I'm not saying use Daniel Jones in a 1 quarterback league, but I think if you're in a 2 quarterback or super flex or playing DFS, that Daniel Jones is someone you should keep an eye on, and should be very much so on your radar. He's been running more, and I think this is a game where he's going to be able to pass better, because like you said, Marcus, their defense of the Cowboys has been really bad, and the Giants' first 4 games were against pretty tough defenses. I think Darius Slayton is a boom or bust wide receiver 3 this week, but I like his chances of going boom, and I have Evan Ingram in a couple of leagues. I was tempted to let him go earlier in the season, but this is the game I've been waiting for. I'm going to give him the opportunity this week. If they flop this week, then I think we got to reevaluate this Giants offense and if we could even trust any of them. But I do like a lot of their players for fantasy this week.
Very much for me, a make or break week for a guy like Evan Ingram. If it doesn't happen this week, then I just don't know. And in some ways, maybe not as seriously, but Daniel Jones, who I thought was sort of a sleeper, a guy that I was taking late in drafts, in a lot of places, just expecting that something maybe good would happen. This is not a make or break. If it doesn't happen this week, I think I can, you can drop Daniel Jones and not feel so bad about it. I mean, it was an experiment and it didn't work, but this is a chance to see what the Giants can do. I do think in deeper leagues, Devontae Freeman is a nice option this week, just to see if he can sort of get going now that he's had some practice time under his belt there with the Giants offense. But it is a situation where you really are streaming these players. This is the opportunity to get them in your lineup. There won't be maybe a lot of these coming up just because of the way they've played, but this is, I think, a chance for everybody to sort of take advantage. In the division, at least partially in that division, you got the Washington football team, which has been very good defensively, not so good offensively. They've made a change at quarterback. Dwayne Haskins is not only not the starter, he's the number 3 guy. So the depth chart now goes Kyle Allen, Alex Smith, and Dwayne Haskins. But that defense has been good. They're playing the Rams, who Their defense is not bad. The offense has left something to be desired. Who, if anyone, do you trust in your lineup in this Rams FT game?
I think it's the wide receivers, and that's probably about it. Like, I think you, with the two teams on bye and the other games potentially up in the air, I don't think this is a week to get away from Cooper Kupp or Robert Woods, despite not, really, I don't think they've lived up to expectations so far this season. But the Rams are running the ball the third most in the league so far this year, which is hurting their pass catchers. But they've been so inconsistent with their RB usage, and now Cam Akers is coming back this week too, that I don't really want to start any of them, and I have all of their backs as flex options or lower. And then for Washington, it's Terry McLaurin, right? Like, I think Terry McLaurin is matchup proof. It's just, for me, it was just a matter of, can Dwayne Haskins get him the ball? But we saw last year that Kyle Allen was able to turn DJ Moore into a top 15 wide receiver, and I think McLaurin's even better than him. So I start McLaurin every week. And then I think Antonio Gibson is actually someone that is becoming a RB2 in fantasy right now. But outside of that, you play the Rams defense, and that's it.
I know that you're not the only person who has made the Kyle Allen, DJ Moore analogy, and I think that's kind of the best thing we have to hold on to as the reason to believe in McLaurin. I do think Gibson's usage is starting to become a little more encouraging, and I like the fact that he catches the football. I mean, he was a hybrid player in college, and the fact that Washington is using him as such means that even if they are playing from behind, he's not quite as likely to come off the field. So I certainly agree with that. I'm with you. I'm staying completely away from the Rams running backs unless I am in dire straits at the running back position or a flex spot. I'm not playing any of those Rams running backs because the matchup is bad and there are potentially three guys that they're going to cycle through. I mean, last week they did a split between Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson, and neither one got into a rhythm and neither one produced. It didn't make sense. Now they're going to throw Cam Akers back into the mix, so I want no parts of that. So you're probably right. I think it's just the receivers. I'm hoping maybe something good for Bobby Trees, but I will tell you that I do have a little bit of apprehension. But I'm going to fire him up, at least as a wide receiver too in some leagues, and hope for the best. Hopefully maybe he finds his way into the end zone at some point during the game. If you want more of this kind of analysis, be sure to check us out, me and Florio and Adam Rank and Kimmy Checks on NFL Fantasy Game Day. That's on Sunday mornings. We kick that off at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. You can find it streaming on NFL.com, in the NFL Fantasy app, and on YouTube at youtube.com/NFL Fantasy Football. In fact, on the YouTube side, we've got Michael F. Florio there answering all your questions. I know he is just grinding away at that for about an hour or so before he comes. Not enough, about 45 minutes before he comes and joins us on the show. So if you haven't jumped on, please jump on. There's a good chance to get some of your questions answered in real time before the games start.